Hi everyone, I'm Rincey and this is Rincey Reads. Today I'm going to be doing my March wrap-up part 2. 2 weeks ago I did my March wrap-up part 1 where I talked about the books that I read in the first half of the month, and so in this video I will be talking about books that I read in the second half of the month. So if you haven't seen that one, I will link it up in the card so you can go check that one out. Lots of wonderful books in there. So the first book I want to talk about, I'm just going to mention really quickly, and that is The Astonishing Color of After by Emily X.R. Pan. This one I'm not going to talk too much about because I did an entire video review on this one. It's spoiler free. I love this book so much that as soon as I finished it, I was like, I have to do a review on it because it deserves all of the attention. This is a debut young adult novel, and you are following this character named Lei, whose mother commits suicide, and she believes that her mother has actually become a bird. And so the story is mainly just about her learning about her family, dealing with grief. This book does a really good job of talking about things like grief as well as suicide and depression. So yeah, again, check out that review for full thoughts on it, but I really enjoyed this book. It's definitely going to be in my top books of the year. I already know it. Next, I ended up finishing Super Mutant Magic Academy by Jillian Tamaki. This is one I mentioned briefly at the end of my part 1 video, but I wanted to talk about it fully because I really enjoyed this as well. This was a complete surprise for me. I didn't really know going into it what to expect. I kind of just went into it with a really open mind, and it just was delightful. The one thing I didn't know going in that I think other people would probably want to know going into it is that this isn't like a single story or anything like that. These are individual comic strips. So go into this reading like you would read Calvin and Hobbes, for example, where each page is its own story, and you follow the same characters or the same groups of characters over the course of this entire book, but you're not following a linear timeline. You're sort of just seeing glimpses into their life over the course of what it seems like a school year. Everything is in black and white, but it's really beautiful. It's really smart. It's weird. Just has some really interesting commentary on the world, on being a teenager, being in high school. I adored this so much. I think that if you have sort of an odd sense of humor, I feel like this would appeal a lot to you. This is something that I also read right before bed. So every night for a number of days, I think it was over a week for sure, I would just pick this up and read a couple of pages and then go to bed. It warmed my heart so much, and it was such a nice way to go to bed. So if you do end up picking this up, I recommend even just doing that with it. Yeah, this book is so original and has such a great point of view. The characters in here are so just fun and amusing and heartwarming. Again, not every single comic in here hit home for me, but I kind of like that. I like that some of them were super weird, and I would finish the page and I would just be like, okay, and then just move on to the next one. Sometimes you just need really weird art and comics in your life, and so yeah, I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Super Mutant Magic Academy works for the Read Harder challenge of both read a comic book written and illustrated by a person of color, as well as read a comic written and illustrated by the same person. Another comic that I finished was The Fade Out by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips with Elizabeth Breitweiser. I believe that she did the colors for this. I believe I talked about this one briefly in that first video. I probably should have rewatched to make sure. But this is a noir comic book, and this is one that I originally started reading in single issues, and then I stopped reading single issues, and so I kept meaning to pick this up when it was put out in trades, and then they came out with a deluxe edition, and my library had the deluxe edition. So this is all 3 volumes in one, and it's a complete story. It's not an ongoing series or anything like that. So it's really nice that if you are someone who likes complete storylines, this one would appeal to you as well. This one takes place in 1940s Hollywood. The story starts off with this writer who wakes up after this really crazy party in an apartment he doesn't really recognize. He sort of gets up and starts looking around, and he sees that the main actress for the film that he's been working on is lying dead on the floor. And instead of calling the cops, he ends up sort of wiping down the room to remove any traces of himself, and he leaves. And then the next time he ends up at the studio, obviously everyone's talking about how the actress is dead, but everyone's talking about it as if it's a suicide. So obviously something suspicious is happening, and so this writer sort of feels obligated to figure out what exactly happened. So I will say that this comic book is rated M for mature. There is a lot of nudity, a lot of sex, and some of the violence is a little bit gruesome sometimes. So if you aren't okay with that, don't pick up this book. If you are in public, don't read this book. But I like how this book tackles a lot of things like the sexism in the industry and the sexual harassment and whatnot that happens in Hollywood. The characters in here are all very, very, very much flawed. Like, there's no real, like, truly good character in here to root for. So if you have a problem with that, you're not going to like this. But this is a true, like, noir story. So if you enjoy noir mysteries, then this is definitely worth picking up. I will say that parts of it feel really slow, and so you kind of just have to be okay with that. This is another one that I sort of just read in pieces. Like, I would just read like 1 or 2 issues every day or so, and so I just like took my time with it. The art in here is really, really beautiful. It's all in full color, and it all, again, just looks very, very typical noir style. So yeah, I think that if you like mysteries, if you like noir mysteries especially, then this is worth picking up. I definitely did not see the story going where it ended up going by the end. And if you are a fan of Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, they are like a notorious comic duo, then this is definitely one that you should pick up. All right, the next book that I finished was an audiobook that I listened to, and it is In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. I have never read this book before, and so I finally ended up picking this one up, specifically because it fits the challenge of read a true crime book, and it could also technically fit the challenge of read a classic in a genre, because it is a classic true crime book. It's considered the first true crime book, so it is like the classic. But yeah, this is one that I had been meaning to pick up, forever, because everyone always talks about it, and I finally did, and I enjoyed it so much. Like I said, I listened to it on audiobook, and that experience in and of itself was great, but I do kind of wished that I had picked up a physical copy of it, because there's a lot of like just really great writing in this book that I wish I had the physical copy of, so I could sort of savor it a little bit more. I think I am going to pick up a physical copy of myself to own, so that way in the future I can reread it. But yeah, if you aren't aware, In Cold Blood is, again, like I said, a true crime book. It follows the murder of these 4 family members. The Cutter family, they live in this like small town in Kansas. There seemed to be like no real motive given for why these people were murdered, as well as like no clues really left behind. And so Truman Capote sort of looks at the Cutter family as well as the small town, and then eventually like the criminals and the people behind it, to see sort of what happened, why it happened, and also just to sort of get in the mindset of all of these different people. This book is so well written. Everyone says this, and it's 100% true. This book reads like it's a fiction book. So if you are someone who is wary of nonfiction, this is definitely one to pick up. The reason why it reads like fiction is because it's very much character focused. You get inside the head of basically everyone in this story, which is something that I always really, really enjoy. The one thing I will say is that it does get off to a bit of a slow start. Truman Capote provides a lot of background on the Cutter family, and so it takes a while before the crime takes place and before it seems like everything really gets going. So if you haven't read this book yet either, and you end up picking this one up, my recommendation would be to go through past the first part into the second part. I believe it's broken up into 4 parts. And so part 2 is really when the story feels like it begins. So if you pick this one up and you're like, oh, this is boring, or oh, nothing's really happening, I would say go through part 1 and get to part 2. And if you are interested in checking this one out on audiobook, I think that the audiobook is really great too. And this is coming from someone who doesn't really listen to very many audiobooks. So yeah, that is definitely a good route to go as well. All right, the next book that I finished was Two Girls Down by Louisa Luna. This is one I picked up kind of on a whim. I had a Saturday where I didn't have plans and I didn't have a lot of work to be done, or like chores around the house to be done, which is very rare. Usually I have one or the other happening. So I looked at my bookshelf and I was like, I wanted something that would grip me and something that I could potentially read in a day. And so this one stood out to me because I knew that it was a mystery and it is relatively short. So I was like, this is what I could potentially read in a day. And I got gripped from the beginning. I really, really enjoyed this book. So in this story, there are 2 girls who go missing from a strip mall parking lot. I believe they're like 10, and I don't remember the other daughter. I think she's like 7 or so. The mom leaves them in the car so she can run inside and buy like a birthday present for a birthday party they're heading over to. And so she runs inside this Kmart, and then when she comes out, the kids are missing. And so the story sort of follows trying to find these girls. They live in this small town in Pennsylvania. The police force is very underfunded and understaffed, so they can't seem to provide all the resources necessary to find these 2 girls. And so the family ends up hiring this private investigator named Alice Vega. Alice Vega has sort of gained a reputation of finding missing children. She has been hired for, I think, they say like 18 missing kid cases, and she always finds them. So Alice Vega heads out to this small town in Pennsylvania. She heads to the police department to partner with them, and the police department, or the person in charge, says that they're not interested in working with her. So she ends up leaving, and she ends up partnering with this other private investigator in town who is a former police officer. And then things sort of just take off from there. Like I said, this story gripped me. It's not like typical missing kids stories, in my opinion. I think that there's something sort of unique and original and very like honest about the way that this one is handled. The main draw for me are the two like investigators, Alice Vega and Cap, the one that she ends up partnering with. Alice Vega reminded me a lot of Kalinda from The Good Wife, if you watch The Good Wife, and then Cap reminded me a lot of Keith Mars from Veronica Mars. So if you like those two characters, I think you'll like this book. But I think the two of them together are really, I don't want to say fun, but it's just interesting to see their dynamics, because Alice Vega is very like tough exterior, doesn't share a lot about her life, etc. Cap is kind of similar, but he's like this divorced dad who has this like really great teenage kid who he like shares his cases with, or not shares, but shares about his cases with her and things like that. And she seems to be really smart and really engaged and things like that. Hence why he reminds me of Keith Mars. And I think their dynamic and the way that they work together and the way that they sort of like butt heads and things like that is handled really, really well. I think the mystery is really well done. I definitely did not see it going where it goes. It doesn't try to pull any like tricks or gotchas or crazy twists or anything like that. I think that it is handled just very realistically, and it also just portrays a lot like what it's like when kids go missing for a family. And also like you can tell how much Alice Vega cares about finding these kids and solving these cases as quickly as possible, because she recognizes that like every second matters in cases like this. So yeah, I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 stars as well. I really, really enjoyed it. If you like mysteries, I think this one is worth picking up. I'm really hoping Luisa Luna writes more mysteries with Alice Vega as like the main investigator, and if it can be Alice Vega and Cap, that would be even better. And the final book that I finished this month is Righteous by Joe Ide. This is the sequel to IQ, which I read last year and really enjoyed. This one picks up basically right where IQ left off. So this is a mystery series, and you are following this character named Isaiah Kintabe, or IQ for short. He works as this sort of like small town private investigator. He lives in South Central LA, and in the first book you find out that he is just like super genius, was supposed to go to Harvard. His brother ends up dying in a hit and run accident, and he basically gets derailed from all of his plans. He doesn't end up going to college or anything like that. And so to basically make money or to get by, he starts doing these sort of like small jobs around for his neighbors, like solving small crimes for them and things like that. And they don't always pay, or they don't always pay well, or sometimes they'll pay him in like meals. And so in this one, Isaiah is contacted by his brother's girlfriend. Her sister has like a gambling problem, and so she contacts IQ to help her out because she's in this massive debt and all this stuff and being hunted down by like Chinese mobsters. And then the other sort of like larger storyline that's running through the series is that IQ is trying to find out who killed his brother. He finds out some things at the end of the first book, which I won't divulge, but it sort of like propels him farther into sort of trying to figure out what happened in this situation. And that takes up a significant portion of this book as well. So yeah, I like this series, but I don't love this series, but I'm going to keep going with it because I think that IQ and his friend Dodson are just really, really great together. IQ is sort of compared to Sherlock Holmes a lot of times, and there are some similarities there, like the extremely keen awareness and observation skills, and also like the social awkwardness. And Dodson is sort of like the Watson to his Holmes, which again, just that dynamic is always really, really great in my opinion. But the way these books are written, it can get like super info dumpy at times. There were so many characters in this book, and I had a little bit of a hard time keeping track of everyone. And it seemed like every single person that you come across in this book gets a full backstory, and it was so much information and so much more than I think was necessary. Like, you guys know me, you know I love like fully fleshed out characters, but I feel like characters that didn't really need to be fleshed out were fleshed out. I will say that Joe Ide does some interesting things in how he ties together the story, but sometimes it gets a little bit overwhelming and a little bit confusing. And so this is like a mystery series that, again, I like but I don't love. I'm gonna keep going with it though, because again, I really like IQ and Dodson, and there wasn't enough of them together in this book in my opinion. I think it leans too heavily on the Marcus storyline, who's IQ's brother, trying to figure out who killed him, and not as much on the other storyline of the book, which I guess it just depends on what your own personal preference is. So yeah, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Again, I'm gonna keep going, like I said, and I think that the way that this book ends, there's potential for it to get better in the future because they sort of resolve some issues. There's a lot of like growing and learning that IQ does in this book that I think could potentially be an improvement in future books. So yeah, that's everything that I read this month. Definitely leave a comment down below letting me know what you read, what your favorite book was, or if you have any questions about any of the books that I talked about, or you read any of these books and you want to talk about them with me. Definitely leave all those down in the comments as well. So yeah, that's all I have for now, and thanks for watching.